Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Absolutely delighted to be at the British University in Dubai. A university I love fondly. Believe me, I'm so proud of what you're doing, Professor Abdullah. Many thanks, Professor Ashley, for the kind invitation. I have a wife who's a doctor, by the way. She's mad, maybe, that's fine. So I'm recording now. Have to be careful. What I'm going to cover, the art and science of doing a PhD. I felt at some stage doing a PhD is in part art and in part science. And I think Professor Abdullah was very, very clear about the difference between the art of doing it and the science of undertaking such an important area of research. A PhD, for me, I'm passionate about this community. I love it because when I was doing my PhD, I felt that I was struggling. So I wanted to document all my experiences in a very comprehensive presentation, and I gave this presentation in many places across the globe. Believe me, I'm absolutely delighted to be in Dubai now this morning at British University in Dubai. I love the animated flags. But because I keep moving from one place to another, Professor Abdullah, I was worried just in case if I get the flags wrong, but they are right. So what I'm going to cover, the art of doing a PhD, then the science of doing it, the methodological approach, the research methodology should be at the heart of doing a PhD. If you don't get your research methodology right, you cannot do a PhD. And Professor Abdullah is absolutely right about adopting the thought part model and the research model, especially in this part of the world, because we don't really have a very strong research culture. This is reality. What you are doing here, you are creating this very strong research culture. You should be congratulated here. And then I'll tell you about the experiences of some PhD holders, people who completed their PhDs, how they felt throughout the process of doing a PhD, and then some final. This is a phone, some sound transmission devices. This one. Radio. Wow. Oh, very clever. I tried it in many places. People struggle to. This one, you're not going to get it. Oh, the fish freezer. This one. It's a stove. And this one? First computer. You can see how research has transformed at least whatever you have industry. This was one of the first maybe washing machine. This was one of the first fridge freezers, the stores. Research has transformed what we are doing. And I bet a lot of this work would have been done by PhD students. Look, the buses, the television, the power of a brand. Look at Coca-Cola. From 1899, is still a recognizable type of brand. So their research has shown that if they keep the brand at the same level, it will help them immensely. And they were absolutely right about it. It's still very, very popular for 100 years. Look at what research can do for you, at least in the construction sector, because I come from construction. I have to show you some buildings. And look at these buildings, how they look like. Believe me, research has helped us to transform some of these buildings. Because the structural analysis, especially for our structural engineering colleagues here, is very, very complicated to design buildings like these. But research has helped us to improve the status of architecture, construction, industry. This is what happened to you when you failed to predict the future almost. You know this company? Kodak. We used to go and buy films and say, please give me a Kodak film. It's not a Kodak film. The company has become bigger than the industry itself. They have gone bankrupt because they have failed to predict the digital revolution. Remember these phone boxes in the UK in 1985 when I was doing my, 87 when I was doing my master's in the UK. We used to use them a lot, phoning our families. And we used to send tapes to our families in Lebanon to say, hello mom and dad, we are fine, our research is progressing well, and you have to wait for somebody who's going to the village to deliver the tapes for them, and then we wait for somebody coming back from Lebanon to the UK to give me the tape from my family. And look what you can do now. Within seconds you are on Skype or whatever technology you want, and it's a different world altogether. But remember, the next generation would look back at this and say, wow, we used to use the iPhone. The iPhone will become something like the phone box. There will be a different set of technologies in 25, 30, 40, 50 years even the iPhone will become relatively primitive technology. Now let me move to the main topic, which is doing a PhD. This statement from John Eliot, to be a top performer. If you are doing a PhD, you are a performer, no question about it. You have to be passionately committed. If you are not passionate about the PhD, for some students who did not turn up for this lecture, I would take notes that they are not passionate about their PhD. Really, as simple as that. If they are passionate about their PhD, they would have turned up on time. They didn't. And they are not fully committed. If you are not passionate and committed to do a PhD, you cannot do it. And you have to be, every now and then, insane about it. You cannot afford to be sane all the time. It's Doctor of Philosophy. It's the philosophical stance of doing a PhD. So if you go mad, it's really promising. I think you should maybe do things outside the box. Don't be compliant all the time. It's much better to get yourself thinking out of the box. It's very, very important. Now, this is not about showing off at all. If you want, you can Google me, you will find the information. But this is just to tell you that I know what I'm talking about. I completed my PhD in 1991. 19th of June, 1991. I remember the date. I completed the Viva at 10 past 2 in the afternoon because I spent 4 years worrying about my PhD. Really worried. When I got the Viva done, that they gave me the result, they said minor corrections, I was excited. I still remember the date, the time. I externally examined more than 52 PhDs. I was reading just one last week for a University of Malaya PhD. Excellent PhD. What did I look at? There was hardly any spelling mistakes. This was really good. The abstract was very, very clear. The literature review was very comprehensive, critical, not just reporting, critical. The research methodology was very sound, solid. The findings, very interesting, original. And the validation phase was very clear. And then I went to the references section. Start looking at the references. Are they up to date? They're talking about building information modeling. So if they are really old, then BIM has progressed really fast in the last few years. And I could see the references, 2014, 13, 12, etc. Gave me confidence straight away in saying that this is a good PhD. So this is my advice to you, to make sure that in doing your PhD, if your literature review is comprehensive, the research methodology is sound, the findings, the analysis are really rigorous, and you have a validation phase, your references are up to date, it's that easy. It's not that difficult. The only problem, it takes 4 years. I've examined so many PhDs, I've supervised so many, I have completed 24 PhDs in Salford, and I'm really proud of what they have achieved. Okay, so I know what I'm talking about, really. Now let me share with you this. I was doing a course with the Leadership Foundation for Higher Education in the UK. We had 21 top academics and administrators. And in one session, they asked us about, this is my life, this is my academic life. Please tell us about your sense of achievements. And this is what I did. I put like, when I completed my bachelor degree, my master's, my PhD, June 1991, by far is the highest sense of achievement. So when you complete your PhD, it will be a milestone for you. It's the date you will remember all your life, because this is a major, major achievement in academic life. It's much more important for me than becoming president of a university. So in terms of the art and science of doing a PhD, the art of doing it, you have to be passionate, you have to be creative. The writing style is so important. You are telling a story to your audience, to your examiners. If it's an interesting story, it's like reading any story in English or in Arabic. Either you get bored with it very quickly, or you're looking forward to the next chapter. And this is where you can make it really exciting by producing it in a very nice writing style. It's smooth, it's flowing, the reader is looking forward to the next chapter and so on. So the storytelling is really, really important. Presentation, I have come across PhDs where you can see spelling mistakes in the abstract of a PhD. What does that tell you? That the student is reckless, he or she doesn't care about their PhD. So presentation, it should be perfect, no mistakes whatsoever. I'm not saying that English is not my mother tongue, is not my first language. We can get somebody to proofread for us. They are not producing the content, they are checking our grammar, spelling, and so on. Nothing wrong with it. Every single person in the UK who comes from a foreign background will have somebody to proofread their PhD. Now, the science of doing it. Of course, you have to rely on evidence. It's not my cousin told me that this topic is important. It doesn't work in doing a PhD. You need solid methodologies. And I'm going to cover today the methodological approach to doing PhD. Originality, no question about it, the findings have to be original. It's a PhD, it's not a bachelor or master's degree. Rigor and validation. And validation is a problem because toward the end of the PhD, you become bored with it 4 years. You say, okay, I'm not going to do the validation phase. And this is bizarre. This is where people get it wrong, in fact. The validation phase may take a few weeks, but please validate your model or your approach. It's really important. You know, when you're doing a PhD, you almost need to go to a fortune teller at some stage and then say, please read my hand or my coffee cup and tell me, am I going to get my PhD? Because it's a risky business. You're taking 4 years of your life and you are not sure about the result. In most cases, people get the PhD. Some with corrections, major or minor. The majority with minor corrections, I would think, if they complete it. Some people don't complete their PhD. But this typical feeling of going to a fortune teller, Al-Bassara in Lebanon, and then say, please, check for me. Am I going to get my PhD? I tried it, in fact, to say, yes, you're going to pass. She was right. I gave her more money. So, PhD is a different word, believe me. When you look at it as a process, you start with the literature review, you identify a gap and the rationale for doing your research, and then you start asking yourself, would I be able to make some serious contribution to knowledge if I can cover this gap? And then you identify a problem, you define the aim, establish objective, and hypothesis or a research question. If you are doing qualitative research, most likely it will be in the form of a research question. If you are doing quantitative research, it will be more of a hypothesis. Then you develop a research plan. Then you identify the research population, how data will be collected, quantitative, qualitative, means of data collections, is it by questionnaire, interview, survey, and means of data analysis, are you going to do content analysis, are you going to do thematic analysis, are you going to do statistical analysis, you decide, depending on the topic, and then you develop a model of some sort or framework, then you make contribution to knowledge, you write it up, and then this is your PhD. Congratulations, it's that easy. It's 5 minutes job in terms of process. Unfortunately, it takes 4 years. Because the literature review will take you a few months, and then you identify the problem, the population of the sample, how you're going to do the analysis, and so on. It takes 3 to 4 years. Now, when people come to me, when I was supervising PhD students in Salford, and they tell me, from day one, I know what I'm doing. I would say to them, then there's no point to do a PhD. If you know from day one what you're doing, I don't think there's a problem. You have to go and read the literature, find out what's happening, identify the gaps, and come up with a topic. You cannot go and then say, I'm just starting my PhD now because I know what I'm doing. You cannot do it. It's not that way. I'll tell you about my own experience in a minute or so. So, what should be at the heart of doing a PhD is the good methodology. Believe me, if your methodology is correct, the rest, you can get away with it. Think out of the box, please. You don't need to be compliant 100% within the topic area. Ownership. It's your PhD, not the supervisor. You start with somebody. In the first year, the supervisor knows more than you. In the final year, you know much more than the supervisor about the subject area. The supervisor knows more about research methodologies and approaches, etc. So it's your PhD. Relationship with supervisor is important. It has to be based on mutual respect. Get published if you can. I mean, a conference like this, I used to do this in Salford, in fact, an internal conference. We ran it for years. It's still running up until now. It's a golden opportunity for students who have not presented before to stand up in front of their colleagues and their professors, and they will get the right feedback about their research. So this is a golden opportunity for you to benefit from this conference, I think. Focus. I remember when I was doing my PhD, somebody asked me, what sort of PhD are you doing? I said, I'm doing a PhD in planning. And the guy said to me, is it family planning? Is it town planning? Imagine the use of the word planning, which means everything on it. You have to be focused, really. Get organized, network, deal with problems, and defend your PhD is very, very important. Do a mock viva, and I'm going to cover as well. But the publication is very important. So for me, these are the key. Good methodology, relationship with supervisor, get published, and learn how to defend your PhD. I am not brave enough. Do you think if I press this one, it will move? Shall I risk it? Oh. You can see, I could have done it, but because men are very careful, they have to be careful. Just in case we panic, we can only do one activity at a time. As Professor Abdullah said, we are good at the science of doing things, the art of doing it. I could have pressed this one, I didn't. But this is something, please, which is very important. The 9, if you count the number of P's of doing a PhD, passion is so important. I keep just referring to passion. Determination, self-discipline, motivation. For 4 years almost you are on your own. You have to be passionate about it. You have to be determined to do it. Preparation, problem identification, and development of strategy is really, really important. Planning of time, have process map, the research map. Philosophical stance, the research methodology. I'm going to cover it really fully in a minute or two. Published literature, please use referee journal papers, not web links and conference proceedings and just research books. Referee journal papers will tell you what's happening in the discipline. The most up-to-date referee journals are really important. Plenty of evidence and originality, data collection, analysis, validation. Once again, it's really important. Productive relationship with supervisor, polish and proof your thesis, and the PhD mock viva, and do publications. It's very, very important to cover all of these things. I wish when I was doing my PhD, somebody told me that these are the key ingredients for a successful PhD. I was learning on the job, so you have a good opportunity to learn from our experience. But ask yourself the question, why are you doing a PhD? Is it for the title? Do you want to become a doctor? Some people do it for the title. Do you like research? You will have better future prospects, support your teaching, get some promotion out of curiosity, part of a funded project maybe, to please your family. When I was doing my PhD, believe me, I was doing it for my family. I wanted them to be proud that I become doctor. I was working in industry. I never dreamt that I will join academia and I will become professor. I thought I would finish, go back, and work in the same company maybe. But I did it to please my family. And forced to do it, in some places people like status, so then they do it. But ask yourself the question, what's your research strategy? And you need to have an overall picture. You cannot just say, I'm just going to do a PhD. You need to understand where you are going, your landing space in 4 or 5 years' time. So the art of doing a PhD. I documented this one, my PhD, in a paragraph. Believe me, you may look at it as a paragraph. It took me a day to prepare it. Well, I swear to God, I spent the whole day thinking, reflecting about my PhD, 4 years. And I was learning from experience. What's really important in doing a PhD? My PhD, I put, covers an interesting topic. It has to be interesting for you to be motivated for 4 years, 3 years, 4 years. If it's not interesting, you will become demotivated. It has a clear rationale, the problem identification, why I'm doing it. Well-defined focus. It wasn't just planning. I was doing scheduling. I was linking design with CPM methods. This was clear, specific. When I started, I thought it's planning. Family planning, town planning. It's supported by strong theoretical underpinnings. You need to understand the theory behind it. And through a critical, very important for us, please, critical and comprehensive literature review. In this part of the world, unfortunately, we are not critical of the literature. We tend to report it that Professor Shamsi developed a model in that area. But you have to say, is it good model, bad model, why is good, why is bad, etc. We have to be critical. And a robust research methodology. This is the key here. The research aim, objectives, questions, hypotheses, depending on the topic, are well articulated, and the research sample is represented. If I'm looking at case studies or questionnaires or interviews, your sample should be representative. It has to be designed properly. The data collection, analysis, and validation phases are comprehensive and appropriate. My PhD is original. It has to be original. Makes a serious contribution to knowledge. They will ask you the question, what's your major or serious contribution to knowledge? It has already been published. When I went for my Viva, I had few publications. So the examiners could not question me that much. When you have publications, it's much easier than it's been referred to some external people. It's written in an exciting, creative, flowing, and convincing style. I talked about the writing style. And the conclusions clearly meet the research objectives. If I were you, I would look at the research objectives in the final chapter, make sure the conclusions meet them. That's all what you need to do. I am proud, you have to be proud of your PhD, not just because of the product, thesis and title. I think Professor Abdullah Shamsi was very clear about it. It's not about becoming a doctor. It's not about the thesis. It's about the process of learning. You become a skilled researcher. You are learning the skills of doing it, not just the product. You will get it. You will get the thesis and the PhD. It's not a big deal. My PhD opened many doors for me. It gave me confidence and strengthened my analytical skills. It has also helped me to find a good job. I say it with pride. I'm president of the Chartered Institute of Building. This institute is based in the UK. It has 181, it's 181 years old. It has 45,000 members from across the globe. I am the first president ever from the Arab world. And it was because maybe the PhD had opened doors for me to get a job and then be in that position. So imagine what a PhD can do for you. Of course, you need an element of luck as well, but a PhD can open many, many doors for you. So the science now of doing a PhD. Now it's going to get harder. So I'm going to cover methodological approaches. I'm going to talk about some aspects of methodological philosophies of research. I'm going to talk about the ontology, epistemology, axiology, rhetoric, and the methodology, which is the process of studying a subject. Please, are you familiar with these terminologies? Some? Yes? Okay. I'm going to simplify it today, and you will see. When I was in Salford, and people said to me, what's your epistemology? I nearly cried from the word epistemology. It sounded like a Greek word. It's very difficult. What are they talking about? I don't understand it. It's hard, but it's simple. You will see from my good friend Martin Saxon how he simplified it, in fact. But remember, what knowledge is called ontology, how we know it is epistemology, what values go into it, axiology, how we write about it is rhetoric, and the process of studying, which is the methodology. So the dimensions of research philosophy, I have three dimensions. I have ontology, two extremes, epistemology, two extremes, and axiologies, two extremes. I have here. Under ontology, there are two extremes, realism or idealism. Realism, a commonly experienced external reality with predetermined nature and structure. You are realistic about what you are doing. Idealism, an unknowable reality perceived in different ways by different individuals. I am here this morning. I'm in Dubai. I love Professor Ashraf. And I got to know Professor Ashley before, and it's a pleasure to be here. My bias towards British University in Dubai and my respect for Professor Al-Shamsi will influence my judgment of the British University in Dubai. So it's very much subjective. It depends on the context, on the experience, and so on. While if my research is realistic, I'm testing concrete structures. Whether Professor Al-Shamsi, myself, 300 people who watch the experiment, we cannot affect it. It's very clear, cause effect. I do the experiment, the concrete block breaks at some load. Whether I watch it or not, it's going to break at that load. So you can see two extremes, realism to idealism. When it comes to epistemology, two extremes, positivism or interpretative. If I'm doing experimental research on concrete structures or running an experiment in a lab, then I'm using the positivist approach. It's cause effect. I test something, I get result. If I'm looking at the perception of Emiratis, of non-Emiratis in the UAE, It's all based around judgment. I just cannot test whether this is reality. Huh? It's all about perceptions. It's about views. So there are two extremes. If you are doing interpretive research, qualitative. If you are doing positivist research, then it's most likely to be quantitative. Two extremes, once again. And then the issue of axiology. Value neutral, value biased. So if I'm doing an experiment on concrete structures, and I'm watching the experiment, it's value neutral, whether I watch it here, whether I do it in UAE, in Lebanon, in UK, in Australia. If the parameters, the variables are controlled in a lab, I will get the same results. It doesn't matter where I'm doing the experiment. So it's repeatable. I can get the same results. Value bias type of research. I said to you before, my love for the UAE would influence my judgment about certain research phenomena. And this is human nature. Value bias. People are biased in their value system. You like it, you don't like it. This is nature. What we need to do, we need to minimize the bias if we can, eliminate it, it will be perfect. But then what happens? You will have then two extremes in terms of the philosophical stance. I'm still used to the other one. If you are in this one, you are doing objective research, you are doing quantitative research, you are doing cause-effect type of research. If you are in that corner here, you are doing subjective research, qualitative by nature. So my approach will be, my ontology will be based on idealism, my epistemology will be based on interpretivism, and my axiology will be biased. If I'm here, I'm doing positivist approach, realistic, and value neutral. So two extremes, quantitative in that corner, as I have to be careful now with being recorded. As engineers, we feel that research only exists in that corner. It's quantitative. It's cause effect. You do the experiment, you get the correlation data, you publish it. For our colleagues in the humanities, which I respect them immensely, they tend to do more research. This is Eric Lu. You do more research in that corner, which is quantitative. Of course, you can use mixed methods as well, so you can use quantitative and qualitative. You can see, if you are doing research in that corner, it's more experimental. If you are doing more research in that corner, it's ethnography and action research. But you can use mixed methods. You can take quantitative and qualitative to do the triangulation. Is it clear, please? Please, it's so important. This is the most important slide. The rest, you can please.
No, we can please.
Thank you. It's really important for you to, I'll give you one example. When I was in Salford, I had one Libyan student. She was looking at architectural buildings in Tripoli. And for some reason, she used some damping devices to measure the dampness in some of these buildings. But her approach was mainly qualitative, not quantitative. So in defending her thesis, I kept telling her, but it's mixed methods and it's more of a quantitative than qualitative because you have used damping devices and you have done correlation and the rest. She said, no, doctor, my philosophical stance, I was sitting in that corner. I was sitting there. It took me an hour to try to question her. Of course, she convinced me that she has used the damping devices just to see some trends, what's happening in terms of dampness and the rest. But her philosophy, her stance was in the qualitative approach. And she passed without any corrections. As long as you can convince your examiner that my stance, wujudi, my existence is in that corner. I'm doing quantitative. Or I am there, I'm doing quantitative. So I interpret results, I'm very idealistic about it, and it's biased by nature. Okay, two extremes. If you are in between, you are using mixed methods. Please.
Do you see that any of these philosophies are more valuable than others?
I don't. As long as they can help you to achieve your research objectives, you have to see what's really appropriate to meet your research objectives. In the humanities field in general, they tend to use the qualitative because they are looking at different type of phenomena from us engineers and scientists, where if you are doing developing new drugs or whatever, it's completely different philosophy for doing it. As long as your research methods help you achieve your research objectives, you are fine. There is no preference whatsoever. Now, people's perception is that, I said to you this before, they will say, if you are not an engineer or a scientist, you feel those guys may not be doing research, which is not true at all. I started here when I was an engineer, and then with time, when I was doing lots of work in construction management, I moved more toward the qualitative approach, and in many instances, I use mixed methods, quantitative and qualitative.
Sometimes they are opting to pragmatism as a threshold for getting out of the books, whether to be objective or subjective in the research.
Once again, I mean, if you look at these, anyway, there are almost a lot of interpretation of the different epistemology as well. I try to simplify it, but when you look at the research philosophies, the pragmatism approach, the positivism approach, and so on, there are a lot of information about it. All what I'm saying, I used to convince my PhD students, adopt this model, tell the examiners where you are in that chart, and then say, I am here, or there, or there. You give them confidence that you know exactly where you stand within the philosophical approach of methodology. And this is about philosophy, really more than the method itself. Now, in terms of validation, if you repeat experiments, for sure you will get the same results. No question about it. But you can repeat the experiment with the wrong assumption, so you're getting the same results, but they are not the right results, for sure. So when you look at the reliability and validity, so I'm repeating my experiment, I get the same results, but they are not valid. I'm not getting them into the center. While in this one, I get valid results, but not reliable. Here, neither valid nor reliable. Here, both valid and reliable. Now, in terms of quantitative research, it tends to be repeatable. You can repeat the experiment, get the same results. You can generalize from the result of an experiment. For the qualitative approach, it's very difficult to generalize the results because it depends on the context, but you can generalize the approach and the methods used. So please, if you're doing qualitative research and then somebody comes to you and then say, can you generalize the results? Can you take these results from the UAE, apply them in Bahrain? I don't think you can. The context is different. But if I'm testing complete structures in Bahrain or in the UAE with the same definition of control variables, etc., I can say yes, I can generalize the results and use them reused. So personal experiences now from some PhD holders. This is my own experience, in fact. In the first 6 months, I was completely confused. People ask me, what are you doing? I said, PhD in planning. I don't know what does it mean, planning. Stability in the second 6 months. Then the second year becomes good productivity. Final year, impatient, anxious. You become confident. When I look back, I said to myself, I wish I was not worried from day one. I wish I have not done this. I wish I have not done that. But you have to go through this learning experience. At least in your case, you are lucky enough really to see about our experiences and learn from them. So this conference is ideal for you to present and learn from each other. This is Dr. Bingo English in Salford. This is typical when you go and talk to your supervisor. You are showing an improvement from last time, but there is a lot more to do. Typical statement when you're doing a PhD. Expected. The challenges, being self-motivated, positive attitude, setting your own deadlines, nobody's watching you, being ruthless with yourself, discussion with peers, get the supervisor interested in your work. It's so important for you, believe me, and access to competence. This is how you feel. Sometimes I felt doing really well, I'm going nowhere, and my level of interest, enthusiasm, and motivation, it goes up and down. Of course, in your case, because of the thought part, is different, but if you are doing a pure research from day one, up and down, depression high, depression low. Typical. But what's important for Bingo was the focus. You start really big, and then you have to focus on a particular area. And ask yourself, why not, how, what, so what? All sorts of typical questions. And sometimes I feel why I started it in the first place, cannot do it anymore, please give me the doctorate. In the final stage, the student goes to supervisor and says, please, I beg you, would you be able to give me a PhD now? typical statement by PhD students. They are so desperate after 3-4 years, really desperate. But look at the bright side. Generally speaking, success rate is very high, really, unless you are fighting with your supervisor or unless you stop doing the PhD. Once you have submitted it, most likely that you pass. This is an experience from Richard Haig, Professor Richard Haig, who was in Salford for years now. He moved to Huddersfield. And for him, the PhD was like Snow White and the 7 PhD students. So at first, you are bashful and dopey. Then 2 years later, you are sick, easy, tired, sleepy, and irritable, grumpy. And finally, everyone calls you doc, and then you are happy. This student, he was first class when he finished his undergraduate degree. He said, I'm going to make a real contribution to science. He was very excited about doing a PhD. And he's very, very proud. He's a full professor now. But then his motivation was going down. Why did I ever start this? Then it goes up again, and then toward the end he said, just give me the doctorate, please. In the American model, of course, you will have your thesis committee is different from the British one, and you have all sorts of people. You have the professor, the guru, the adversary, the strawman woman, the nice guy, yeah, and the assistant professor. And they try to, you need to please them. Thanks to, in the British system, you only need to please your external examiner and your internal examiner. Now, this is what by Professor Diane Ahmed from Salford as well. For her, a PhD was like, it's like a tree. So the roots are the underpinning theory, the methodology is the stem, and the outcomes are the fruits, which are the PhDs. But for her, research with passion is true ingredient to success. Passion for reading, passion for learning, passion for applying concepts, passion for analyzing, for publishing, for writing, for being critical. You have to be passionate about all these aspects to succeed. So really, what's needed, at least in our part of the world, we need clear policies about doing PhD, strong infrastructure, it seems you have it here, training programs, exactly what you're doing this morning, creating capacity for supervisory capacity and for students to understand the research methods, motivated staff and students, and you will succeed. Now, getting published, please. I want to cover this one because it's very, very important for you, and especially publications in reference journals. I'm not expecting a PhD student to start publishing from year 1, but toward the end of your PhD, in the final year, you should try to get 1 or 2 referee journal publications, because this will give you the external and internal examiner the confidence that your research has been externally verified by experts in your area. And the beauty about referee journal papers, no commercial fees, status is higher than conference publications for sure, more weight, more rigor, and so on. It helps your academic career, you establish a name through citation, support your PhD viva, and lead to collaboration. So by starting a new referee journal paper, you can start with a conference paper like this. You present it, you improve it, you submit it somewhere else to a journal later. And you can decide on the journal, the quality, the journal ranking, the speed of publications, draft an outline of the paper, discuss it with your supervisor, produce first draft, and so on. Improve paper, submit it. Now, when you look at every single referee journal paper on earth, maybe, it has this structure. It has an abstract, concise, to the point, research methodology, main contribution. We Arabs tend to be producing very long abstract because we keep repeating ourselves. When you look at abstract in the West in general, they are very short, 4 or 5 lines, which summarize the problem you are solving, the methodology you have adopted, your contribution to knowledge. It doesn't need to be 1-page abstract. Few lines abstract is much more powerful than larger abstract. And then you start with the introduction, subject matter, you introduce the paper, then literature review, comprehensive, critical, referee papers, please. A section on research methodology, very clear, rigorous. Main findings, if you need to do some statistical analysis, etc. Testing and validation, conclusions, references, whatever system you are using. Follow guidelines strictly, respond to corrections. I have been told in many instances, when you submit a paper, they will give you corrections, most likely. People tend not to submit the final version, corrections, they're not going to do that. But in most cases, the papers get accepted once you have done the correction. So please, Don't give up. And if rejected, send it somewhere else. You can get the publication for sure. Ask yourself the key questions in doing the PhD or publishing paper. Readability, does it communicate the right message? Is it clear? Is there a logical progression? Originality, why was it written? What's new? Credibility, are the conclusions valid? Applicability, how do findings apply to the world of practice? And internationality, to what extent it has a national dimension? Yes, please.
Okay, if you just go back to the previous slide, please. I think one thing which is also very important, even before the abstract,
Yeah.
similar to the abstract, is your title.
Yeah.
Sometimes people write ambiguous titles,
Good one.
and if you do that,
Yes.
no one will read it. No one.
Good point.
You need to show them.
The first one is the
something
title,
that's
isn't it?
interesting.
Yes.
That's the first line.
Good one. Thank you. I will add it to my presentation. So now, please, the right way of doing a PhD: think, plan, do, reflect, evaluate, learn, and plan better. Do not start straight away by doing, then thinking, then you deflect from doing it, then you regret it, then you blame somebody else, not yourself, and you learn not, and you plan not. This is the right model of doing a PhD. This is proper planning. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Unfortunately, I'm recorded. I'm going to say it. Why not? In Lebanon, when we tried to put the motorways, we dug all the trenches. We put water pipes first, then we put the soil, then we remembered telecommunication line. We dig again, we put the communication line. So please, before we do something, let's think about it, plan, do, reflect, and do it properly. You cannot afford to do mistakes in doing a PhD. But at the same time, you cannot afford to go forever getting it perfect, because there is no such thing as Mr. or Miss Perfect. I'm going to tell you a story now about a good PhD and perfectionist PhD. There was a king, let me phrase it now, we changed it from the engineer and the architect to good PhD and bad PhD. There was a king who wanted a toaster. He wanted to toast some bread in the morning, toasted bread. So he asked a pragmatic PhD student and a perfectionist PhD student to produce it for him. So the pragmatic person went home, designed it, manufactured it, tested it, put some bread, it was working. He was so happy. He couldn't wait to see the king. He went to the king, said to the king, "King, here is the toaster." The king plugged it in, put some bread, he got toasted bread. He was so happy. All what he wanted, toasted bread. The perfectionist PhD disappeared for 20 years and came back and said, "Here is the design of the toaster, Your Highness." He put it on A0s, papers connected together. He said, "You can use it as a toaster, you can use it as a hairdryer, you can use it as a washing machine." And the story ends by saying, the king decided to imprison the perfectionist PhD, and they all lived happily ever after. So in doing a PhD, please, don't go for perfection, because you can go forever finding the right test, the right data. You have to be pragmatic about it. Your methodology should be sound, your literature review comprehensive, your analysis is valid, but you can go forever finding the perfect moment. You can go forever, believe me. So this is my advice to you, and this is where most people have failed when they want to be perfectionists about doing a PhD. The future now, I think these are the topics which I'm glad when I heard the introduction from Professor Abdullah. A lot of work on sustainability issue, financial framework. I think finance will become a major issue. Demographic change is a good topic, because when you look at the population, young population in the Gulf states, old population in the West, so the elderly, there's more research on the elderly in the West than in the East, while in the East you have more research on youth and of course, a lot of research on knowledge and education. I'm glad that you have doctorate in education, in fact, behavioral change, technological progress, and so on. So really, doing a PhD is in part art and in part science. solid understanding of methodological issues, please. It's so important for you to understand the methodologies. Learning on the job, you can learn every day, learning something different, and be motivated to publish, especially toward the end. Thank you for this.